Daniel Hoyne, Champion Data's guru. Welcome, mate.
Hello, G. Hello, Kane. How are we?
Hoyne.
Interesting introduction there, G. I was wondering, I had no idea where you were going with that.
Oh, that's not
there.
the introduction. I'm more interested in your overall observations. You want to discuss whinges. Now, where do you start and finish with that topic?
The witches. No, you make me laugh, G. I'll give you that. But no. I wanted to start today. Always interested, just to keep track of, the trends of the game and potentially where some things are heading, and potentially some significant changes that might be at play. And despite the rundown, it's wingers I wanted to talk about today, and the role of the wingers. So,
Okay, I thought you could have come up with a top 10 whinges.
Probably could have done that. That would have been an interesting list, I reckon. We probably could have done that quite comfortably.
Kane, can you work on that for tomorrow?
No, I think I'd be in there. But Hoyne, we want to talk about wingers. So what in particular do you want to talk about with the wingers?
Yeah, so I think for a long period now, probably since the Richmond days and maybe even the Hawthorn days under Clarko as well, the wingers have probably been more you lock away, you're putting them out in the wing. They need to have elite endurance. They need to be there to sort of, just run the absolute tram tracks, if you like, running up and down the goalpost all day and covering some significant distance, and really being, critical in terms of your ability to be able to help your team get out of your D50, but then be able to help your team sort of defend opposition ball movement. And, if you go back over time, with the Hawthorn days, that was Isaac Smith on one wing and Brad Hill on the other, two absolute elite wingmen. And I think Damien Hardwick and the Richmond system probably took that to another level, and with all due respect to these players, just more your role players in your Camden McIntosh type and then your Brandon Ellis type, if you like, just to be able to play that role. You're there not to pick up 25, 30 disposals and have a huge impact offensively, but you're going to help our system. And then you look ahead to what West Coast did with Chris Maston and Andrew Gaff during their 2018 campaign. You look at what Melbourne did, sort of during their campaign with Ed Langdon on one wing and then Brayshaw on the other, and then the last 12 months. 12 months, Ed Langdon on one wing and then Lockie Hunter on the other, if you like. But I think it's starting to change now, and I think teams are trying to get a little bit more creative with that position and not just sort of put that magnet there as being the absolute role player to help with what I've actually just spoken about before.
Did Dacos and Sidebottom force that change?
I think Dacos and Sidebottom have potentially brought about a greater discussion in terms of how do you actually maximise them offensively. You saw what Dacos did last year. He was amazing in terms of what he was able to do offensively and rack up large numbers and not just be that role player. But I think there's three teams to me that I just wanted to talk about and what they're doing with this role this year that potentially the rest of the competition might look at trying to actually catch on. So if you go back to Thursday night and the role that Berry did, the role that Archie did, and the role that Jasper Fletcher did on Petrarca. So, they didn't utilise one of their inside midfielders to negate Petrarca. They used a winger to actually negate that. So they didn't lose that clearance player at stoppage, and then they were able to still get the clearance dominance while locking away Melbourne's best player. Petrarca clearly had his worst game of the season. Heading in, he was a top 10 player in the competition. His score involvements were through the roof. You had to do something with it. I'm sitting there probably thinking, probably that's going to be Josh Dunkley. Brisbane do something totally different. That probably would have caught Melbourne by surprise. Use the winger, keep Josh Dunkley as a stoppage player. Win-win.
So what did they give up? A sweeper?
Yeah, so creative coaching. Gave up one winger, only played with one wing. So pretty clever, something that we haven't actually sort of seen too often before. What Geelong are doing this year with their wingers, so one winger is a pure defensive winner, whether that's a Zach Tui or a Mark O'Connor type, and then the other is there as a pure offensive charge forward attack with ball in hand. So we've seen Jeremy Cameron do that twice against the Dogs and against Adelaide, not for full games, but through periods in that game, and it has really caused carnage through there. Ollie Dempsey has been that player. So, those two sort of have, sort of very similar attributes in terms of what they're able to do above the air. So they're probably going to be able to, outmark and expose their opposition wingmen. So charge forward of the ball. Ollie Dempsey is the 5th best wingman in the competition this year. So having a really significant impact in that role. And then trying something a little bit different on Sunday against North Melbourne, where you probably can try a little bit something different, and utilising Mark Blicavs, who probably for the last 18 months has been a centre bounce player, who has then played ruck, playing that wing role, and he played that attacking wing role. Kicked a goal in the first quarter, got out the back. Second quarter, got out the back in the goal square. Could have had a second goal, handballs the ball over. So something a little bit different with what they're doing with their wingmen. And then the Swans are the third. So the Swans are tending to use a bit of Chad Warner. They're tending to use a bit of Errol Goulden, a little bit of Isaac Heaney on the wing to be that really aggressive midfielder, not necessarily charge forward like the Geelong blokes are, but get involved significantly offensively. Leave Braden Campbell as the main winger to sort of, be that defensive option, but utilise one of their best inside midfielders to actually spend some time on the wing as opposed to using that player forward of centre. So I just think it's just an interesting discussion, an interesting thing just to keep an eye on across a competition, whether or not some other teams come about. Because if you go through the rest of the of the 14, 15 teams in the competition, a lot of them are set and forget in terms of what they're doing with their wingers. Just a couple of them are starting to change that discussion, and we know what this industry is like. It takes a little bit of time for for teams to pick up on this. So just keep an eye on it over the next couple of weeks.
So, Kane, it makes it an invidious challenge for you All-Australian selectors to pick out a wingman. Is it 100% wingman, or is it somebody who isn't 100% anywhere but fantastic, like Mark Blicavs, who was an All-Australian wingman a couple of years ago and well and truly overdue?
Yeah, it's always a challenge, isn't it, Gerard? As you know better than anyone, is to try and get the team as close to the positional accuracy as you possibly can. And no doubt we spend a lot of time on the wingman and the second ruck and trying to pick a team that can actually go out and play with on the weekend. I think last year we did a pretty good job without patting ourselves on the back to get that. There's always going to be one or two positions that are debatable, and always a couple of players unlucky to miss out, and no doubt this year will be the same.
So whenever you come in and say something like this player is the number 5 wingman, Ollie Dempsey's the 5th best wingman in the competition, invariably we'll have a lot of people wanting to know, well, who are the other 4? Who's number 1 through to 4?
Yeah, so if we go this year, so actually Ollie Dempsey's number 4 in the competition this year. The Hawks are a really good pickup with Marcio D'Ambrosio.
Yeah.
I think I actually got that right. Number 1 in the competition at the moment. Errol Goulden, so the impact, I just spoke about him, when he's actually on the wing, the impact that he's actually having with ball in hand has been superb. Bailey Banfield's been a really significant sort of role player for Fremantle, playing that high half forward and wing role. Ollie Dempsey comes in at number 4, and Jaden Hunt's having a really good year. He is having a good year, isn't he? At West Coast, comes in number 5 in the competition. So just an interesting watch just to see whether or not anything changes.
All right, let's get through your 7 main talking points, and we'll start with the Hawks. Hoyne, what's happening there?
Yeah, I just want to have a discussion and a bit more of a broader conversation with you guys around the Hawks, and just the expectation to reality piece, if you like. I think, I just wonder whether or not, from an expectation perspective, the worst thing that happened for Hawthorn last year was beating Collingwood and beating Brisbane. 2 really impressive performances, and potentially that gave the industry the expectation that this team is ready to bounce and bounce quick. I just wanted to put a couple of things on the agenda if I can. So we're very quick to change opinion in the industry, but 25 games ago for Hawthorn, and I'm going back to round 2, 2023. They just got belted by Sydney by 81 points. And and you go back and have a look at some of the articles, the whole industry discussion was it's an indictment on the competition, what Hawthorn have done. By just going so hard with the rebuild, it's a disgrace. Those sort of those teams that play Hawthorn twice are going to get a leg up. It's going to be embarrassing. They're going to lose by 80 points, 100 points week on week, and rah. We're 25 games down the track, and this team has got younger from that stage.
And injured.
And that's the other point I was going to make. So a couple of other points to that. So last year, they had the second best run with injury of any team in the competition. They capitalise on it. They win 7 games. This year, their injuries, have been there to see. So a team that's in the rebuild mode, that is on average the youngest team in the competition week on week, have now got injuries. Surely the expectation is what we're actually seeing at the moment. Go back 12 months ago, they played Gold Coast up at Gold Coast, and they lost by more than what they did on the weekend, and actually put in a worse performance than what they did on the weekend. You go through their year this year, and this is why I think we're overreacting to what's actually happening at the Hawks at the moment. So Essendon round 1, accuracy decides that game.
Yep.
Essendon's great accuracy and Hawthorn's poor in accuracy. I think the first quarter against Melbourne, the way that they played surprised people, was
Yep.
and was probably a little bit disappointing, but that was a bit of a one-off.
Yep.
Right? Then they challenged Geelong for 2 quarters, and the other 2 quarters Geelong get them, as they should. Then they play Collingwood. Connor McDonald kicks that goal. They potentially win that game, and they're sitting there 1-4. They go up to Gold Coast, and I think we could all sit here, and we talked about Gold Coast last week, and what they're doing defensively at the moment is the best in the competition. They go up there, play Gold Coast, slippery night. They're going to be really challenging Gold Coast to beat up at Gold Coast, and they get rolled. And they were disappointing. Their midfield group was disappointing. I get that. And there's a few players that are in, sort of a bit of a bleak patch at the moment. But in terms of where this footy club sits, I don't think it should be a surprise. And I'm not sure if they would be surprised with what's happening, with what's actually happening now. They'd be disappointed with their performance on the weekend. But in terms of the big picture discussion, are we really surprised with where they're at? Are you surprised, Kane, with where they're at, Gerard? I'm not sure. I think we're quickly, I think we're there to quickly change opinion. Very easily.
I've been a strong supporter of what they've done in the coach. I was disappointed with the game on the weekend was the most disappointed I've been this year. But then you look through it and you go, okay, well, Gold Coast is stacked. I think they had 11 top 10 picks. Hawthorn had 3, and you go, it sort of makes a bit more sense with the performance. But my concern was around the demeanour of the coach. So I hadn't seen him as frustrated as that. I hadn't seen him as animated. I hadn't seen him as angry as that. Coaching from the boundary line, which he doesn't usually do. Really forthright in his comments after the game, usually really measured and composed. So that gave me the first inkling that maybe they're a bit more worried than they'd previously let on.
Yep. Yeah.
You're getting some feedback from Luke Hoyne, who says, I love that you brought this up. Media mass opinions of teams are often so dumb. It happened to Freo 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I agree with what Kane said. Like, that midfield group has been disappointing this year. Without Will Day, they've really only had one solid performance, and that was... So Newcomb's only had one solid performance for the year, and that was against Collingwood. He was fantastic against Collingwood, but he hasn't.
Nash? Like these
100%. Yeah, we mentioned Nash on this show last year, Kane, that his centre bounce returns in terms of when he was actually in there was actually up there with the best in the competition. So he's not having that impact. The midfield group is the issue at the moment in terms of their ability to be able to move the ball. That's actually still going okay. They're doing it slightly differently. Their ability to defend ball movement is actually okay, but they're just getting absolutely assaulted, week on week in that midfield group. So what they do there, and the impact of no Will Day, potentially that's sort of bigger than we actually first thought. But the overall, the rebuild isn't always straightforward. It isn't always a 4-win, a 7-win, a 10-win, a 13-win, a 15-win season. It doesn't actually happen that way. You go back and have a look at all the rebuilds. It's sort of it has sort of chopped and changed. And I think this is a year for Hawthorn where they might only win 4, 5, 6 games, and they might go backwards a little bit. But in terms of what's actually there, I think just cool the Jets a little bit.
Blake Acres is the best winger in the league, says a Carlton supporter who hasn't got the data, which I know what you think that makes him, but where is he?
No, I love the text. No, he's actually not anywhere on my page at the moment, so I need to scroll down a little bit further. So unfortunately 046. I can't give you any positivity on Blake Acres.
Can you give us some positivity on the Blues? Because whilst they are 4-1, I'm nervous for the Blues for a couple of reasons. Sard's done his hammies out for 6. Couple of other hamstring injuries, Chera, I think 1 to 2, and McGovern, just your standard hammy. And then this is their fixture, which we've spoken about. The Giants, Geelong, Collingwood, Melbourne, Sydney, the Suns, Port, and Essendon before their bye. What did you make of their performance and their season to date, Hoyne?
The only reason I'll be a little bit concerned is just the injury front, Kane, as you mentioned there, and then the draw. But I'm always big on it's more how you're playing, not who you're playing. But there is a tipping point when it comes to the injury side of things. So obviously, losing two out of your back half, for the next couple of weeks is going to hurt. But I just want to more talk about the structure of the team on the weekend and moving forward, and actually again have that sort of conversation with you guys. And it surprised me to see Pitnet back in the team and playing Pitnet and Tom De Koning together. And we look at, if you look at every team heading into this year, there was an area of improvement that everyone sort of, I thought that was, there for everyone to improve on to get better in 2024. And clearly that part of the game for Carlton was the turnover game. Their contest and clearance work has been unbelievable for the 2 years beforehand, but their turnover game last year was a bit disappointing, and that needed to get better if they were actually going to compete. We go to the first 4 weeks of the year. They finish the first 4 games of the year. They're the best turnover team in the competition. It's been fantastic. It's been forward half pressure
coming on here.
But then Pitnet comes back into the team for the first time in the year, and for the first time for the year, they lose a turnover game. But their stoppage game comes back.
Yep.
And they dominate stoppage. They score 14 times to 8 from stoppage. They win that battle against Adelaide, but they lose the most important aspect of the game for the first time he's been back. So you go over the last couple of years, when it has just been Tom De Koning, Carlton have won the turnover game 60% of the time, 6 out of 10 games. They've won it on average by 7 points a game. That profile there is going to take you a long way. That's going to take you, very close to a prelim final weekend. When they've both played, they've won the turnover game 6 of 14 times.
And that'll take you to?
That will be very fortunate to get to a finals campaign, let alone any further than that. When it's just been Pitnet alone, they've won 1 of 5 turnover games when it's just been Pitnet and no Tom De Koning there. So the previous 3 weeks heading in, yes, they had a little bit of a softer draw, but they were plus 98 in the turnover game. They lose that for the first time. I'm looking at Tom De Koning, and he plays 30 minutes as a key forward on the weekend against Adelaide. He's targeted once inside forward 50. To me, that's a waste.
Waste.
And I don't think that they need it, given how well Harry's going and how well Curno's going, and the impact of a little bit of ruck time that it's had on Harry as well. So I think, I'd just be a little bit careful if I'm Carlton to not get too consumed about what's happening in your clearance game at the moment, and thinking that potentially that's a Pitnet, solution, and that came true. Your profile beforehand was strong, and that's going to hold you in good shape. The addition of Sam Walsh and the addition of Chera to come, I'm pretty confident that clearance game will come back. Don't lose the aspect of your game in the first month of the year that saw your profile looking at going, this is better. This is going to hold you in good shape come prelim final weekend. Just be careful about that. I'm not sure what you think, Kane, whether or not the 2 ruck sort of situation works or not.
Well, when you lock yourself into, you sign that ruckman for 4 years, and then he hasn't played for the first 4 weeks of the season. There's something like he's desperate to play, and it's almost like a goodwill gesture. Okay, Chera comes out, geez, we better play him. We've promised him something, and we've promised him that he's going to work with De Koning, so we better play him. I don't think sometimes clubs are ruthless enough. Look, there's going to be a point where Port Adelaide go, we're going to have to play Jordan Sweet. And Soldo's going pretty well. But we've promised this guy some opportunities to get out of the Bulldogs and come and play. He would be getting more opportunities at the Bulldogs right now than he would at Port Adelaide. So there's going to come a point where I bet you they play him soon for that exact reason. So I just think sometimes clubs aren't as ruthless as they should. And if one of them is going to be forward, it's not Pitnet, it's De Koning. De Koning's a much more capable forward than what Pitnet is. So if he's going to ruck for 80%, De Koning goes forward and you stretch him with 3 talls. But then your point about the inability to defend comes in as well. So
plus he was only used once in how many minutes he was there.
So targeted once in 30 minutes. And 30 minutes. So
they've solved the ruck problem, haven't they, with Big H?
Yeah, and their forward 50's been
and
fine.
Adelaide only had O'Brien, and that was it. Like it was literally O'Brien and Lockie Gallant, who's a string bean. Like he's very skinny and wasn't going to play many meaningful ruck minutes at all. So yeah, it's a good pickup. Speaking of that, their opposition was Adelaide. I had an argument with Bucks on Monday. I said, geez, coaches are stubborn. We've all been calling for a midfield change at Adelaide. It's the most obvious move that you could possibly make. And he resisted and he resisted and he resisted. And he goes, bang, okay, Isaac Rankine's going to go there 20 times. And Buck says, you're pig-headed. No, you're big-headed if you think coaches are stubborn and pushing back against media advice. But that was my view, and I stand by it. What did you make of the Crows?
Yeah, I thought they were super. And it just looked different.
What did
didn't
they
it?
do?
It just
Well,
looked-
what looked different? What did they do specifically?
Well, their ball use going inside 50 was just poles apart to what we've actually seen in the first 3 or 4 weeks of the year. I think just looking at it from the first 3 or 4 weeks of the year, they didn't have sort of any real issues in terms of just getting it in. It was more the method in terms of what they wanted to do, getting it inside 50. And it just looked like to me that it was just, let's just get it in there and we'll score, because last year we had the best forward 50 in the competition and they would just get the job done. But I just wanted to just put just an individual on the radar, and we've talked about their back 6, back 7, and sort of the lack of star factor behind the footy. Yes, you can.
Is it the youngster Max Michaelini?
I think he's going to be a star in terms of just how tough he is. And
is it Josh Worrell? It's not Josh Worrell, is it?
No, it's not Josh Worrell. It's a very similar sort of player, left footer, halfback flanker, who's having a superb season. He's a delisted free agent. His name is Mitchell Hinge. So Mitchell Hinge at the moment, he is becoming that weapon for Adelaide that is having significant impact on the game. And he's doing it in different ways. So usually you see a halfback flanker rack up a lot of uncontested ball. So around about 25 to 30% of their ball is one contested, so 70% uncontested. He's going at 50-50 in terms of his ability to be able to win contest and win uncontested ball, which is very rare for a player in his position. His ability to be able to impact the game with ball in hand, coming out of defensive 50, he's the 8th best kick in the competition, and overall full ground, he's the 20th best kick in the competition. And what he's been able to do from intercept perspective at ground level is identical to Tom Stewart. So this guy's having a fantastic season. On our rating system at the moment, he's the 9th best player in the competition, up from 95th last year and up from 133rd the year before. So potentially they've been able to find this player, which is why I was sitting there, waiting for Dawson to go back. He hasn't gone back, which got me thinking, why isn't that the case? Do a little bit of digging, and this guy is starting to have significant impact, which actually makes sense as to why Matty Nix hasn't actually played Jordan Dawson.
Where did Hinge come from? Did he come from the Bombers?
Brisbane,
okay.
Yeah, Brisbane. So very rarely do you see a delisted free agent work. They're delisted for a region, for a reason. But hats off to Adelaide. Hats off to
Isn't it ironic?
The
The person that the Lions could use right now is a halfback flanker coming off.
Yeah.
All right, Hoyne, let's, before the first little breather here, let's play Guess Who. What clues have you got for us today?
Got a bit of feedback last week that the team Guess Who was actually a real positive. So I'm going to go down the team aspect, gives everyone a greater chance.
Easier to guess.
So there's only one team in the competition after round 5 that, from a ball movement perspective, is ranking top 4 offensively and top 4 defensively in full ground ball movement. One team in the competition. Who is that team?
I've got an idea who that might be. There is only one team that's rated in the top 4 for their ball movement, also defending ball movement, and a lot of guesses coming through. Definitely Geelong. Has to be the Giants. Is it the Saints? It's got to be the Cats. GWS says Ben. Gold Coast, Fremantle, the Lions, Sydney, all getting some love. Gerard, have you got a guess?
I'm going to go for the Saints.
The Saints, no, they are not there. St Kilda, they were the best ball movement team in the competition last year.
I'm going to go Port Adelaide.
Disappeared.
Hoyne, my power.
No, Port Adelaide aren't there either. They're moving it well, but have some work to do. Defensively. So no, there's been some good guesses, but the answer to the Guess Who today is Brisbane. So, and there was someone on the text machine before that just wanted me to talk about Brisbane and what they're doing at the moment. So he was ahead of time, that person. So the reason why I wanted to throw up what they're doing at the moment is that, and this is why sort of, with the role that we've got the ability, we're not there just from a pure wins and loss perspective. We're there from the big picture, assessing, is your game going to hold up long term or not? And, the win-loss, and that's why, I was talking about Melbourne last week, the win-loss can sort of mask things, when you're going well a little bit. And Simon Goodwin ironically mentioned that in his presser as well, post-game on Thursday night, that they weren't going as well as what the win-loss had suggested. And I think Brisbane were the opposite in terms of they were actually going a lot better than their win-loss suggested. So The reason why I keep banging on about the turnover game, 17 of the last 18 premiers have been top 3 in the turnover game. So if you can't get that aspect right, that is when there are red flags, and that's what's happening at Collingwood at the moment, which is why there's red flags in their game. They need some significant improvement there. Brisbane don't have that. Brisbane's turnover game, and especially what they're doing defensively at the moment, is the best in the competition. They are the hardest team in the competition to punish a turnover against and get it actually on the scoreboard at the moment. Full ground defence, so everything in total, no team is conceding fewer shots at goal than what Brisbane have done at the moment. If their opposition had a kick to expectation at the moment, Brisbane would be ranked number 1 for points against. In terms of when the opposition actually win possession and turning it into a score, only Gold Coast and Geelong are actually harder to do that against at the moment. So this defensive profile is absolutely rock solid. And the go-to report that I've got in front of me that I have from week to week, there are greens everywhere with what Brisbane are doing at the moment. There's a couple of little issues. Their ability to connect going inside 50 is still a bit of an issue. And the only thing that's been a bit of an issue defensively at the moment is their sort of ability to concede goals from defensive 50 stoppages, which are just coach killers, and to concede goals from centre bounces, which again are coach killers. In terms of a system perspective, it is absolutely rock solid. And a couple of players I just want to just give a bit of a shout out to at the moment. So Jack Payne last year, his first half of the year last year was a huge win for Brisbane and was a massive reason as to why they had improved significantly defensively off the back of what they dished up in 2022. But in the back end of last year, his ability to be able to intercept the opposition in the D50 completely dropped away. He went from number 2 in the competition for taking intercept marks in the D50 to just nowhere near it in the second half of the year.
Lost his confidence?
His first 2 games of the year this year, same. His last 3 weeks, he's taken 7 intercept marks again. So he looks rock solid, completely shut out Bailey Fritsch in that game on the weekend. And then we talk about clearly the loss of Coleman is significant. But in terms of what it's doing from a team perspective, again, Brisbane's ball movement is strong. What Dane Zorko is doing behind the ball is absolutely out of this world. When he exits the ball from defensive 50, his kicking is 30% above expectation.
Gee.
He's clearly the best kick in the competition when exiting from D50. Sorry, Kane, you got...
Yeah, I've got a question for you off the back of this. So, big game Saturday. It is Brisbane taking on Geelong. Are you suggesting, like you did with Melbourne last week, that Brisbane are going better than what everyone is suggesting they are? Like Melbourne are going probably worse than what people thought they were going. Is this your pick, Brisbane to beat Geelong this week?
I think Brisbane will beat Geelong. Yeah,
Okay.
I think they will. I think Geelong are going better than what Melbourne are going. So it's going to be. I think it's going to be a fascinating contest. I only just found out that Zach Bailey's out now for the next 4 to 6 weeks.
What with?
A foot issue.
Yeah, I think it sounds like a syndesmosis. They said high ankle sprain. So
Yep.
So and he's been flying as a midfielder as well. So if you lose him and then you lose Charlie Cameron, this is a game. System wise, things are going well. This is a game if you can just somehow just scratch through a win, and just win one of the next 2. I think that's all you need to do if you're Brisbane. Win one of the next 2, get to 3 and 4. With your profile, as we talk about, we're not just purely wins and losses. With this profile at the moment, if this continues for the remainder of the year, I will be shocked if they're not playing prelim final weekend. If this continues,
That's the big. That's the big.
that's
tip.
the bomb that he's dropped. We'll see if some others sort of tip into this in 24 hours' time, Gerard and Hoyne. But the tribunal is now deliberating over the Charlie Cameron. It's taken forever. I did like this little bit of a fun fact. Adrian Anderson, who is representing Charlie Cameron, said Cameron is one of 355 players to have ever played 200 games and never be suspended out of a total of 13,125 players. So
He's done his research.
355 players that have played 200 games and never been suspended, and Charlie Cameron is one of those. All right, Brisbane are going a lot better than their ladder position perhaps says. What about the Saints, Hoyne? I know they kicked the last 6 goals. I don't think they've got a lot going for them. Am I right in saying that, or are you going to come with a different perspective?
No, I think they need to start having a look at their magnets at the moment and what they're actually going to do to maximise what's happening at the stoppage situation. So a couple of parts here on the Saints. Just want to give Jack Steele a bit of love to start with. I feel like he's back to his All-Australian
Did a good
form.
job on Green, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. And in terms of what he's been able to do offensively this year, we've got him as the 25th best player in the competition. Last year was 154th, the year before 169th. Off the back of 2 All-Australian seasons, his form over the previous 24 months had completely fallen away. What he's doing now in both phases of the game from a ball winning and a ball use perspective is top 30 in the competition. So he's going extremely well. Couple of things that I think that they need to address, and I think this is where you're probably getting to, Kane, as well. So they are, from a raw clearance perspective, the 5th best clearance team in the competition. In terms of what they get on the scoreboard, they're 17th. So they're not getting advantage off the back of what Rowan Marshall's doing. They're not getting advantage of what off the back of what Jack Steele's doing. And I think in terms of just their pure effectiveness from clearance, so there's ability to be able to win raw clearances, which is what they're doing, but are they effective? All of Marshall, Ross, Winhager and Sinclair, their clearances are all well below AFL average in terms of their effectiveness. And I know Kingy's really big on this, and I think he's right in terms of having a look at Wanganeen Malera and getting him in to that midfield mix, to be that receive player and to be that ball user, to take advantage of what they're actually doing at the absolute raw clearance. He's currently the 22nd best player in the competition. He's rated as the 3rd best kick in the competition, and his overall impact from a ball use perspective is the 12th best in the competition. I just look at it and I just wonder whether or not the time is now to get him into the midfield mix, because their ball movement game has gone from number 1 last year to 13th. So it's not working with him behind the footy, despite what he's actually doing, and in terms of being the 22nd best player, in terms of the overall impact on the team, that's not there in terms of their transition from one end of the ground to the other. This guy's impact with ball in hand has been significant. Move him up the ground a little bit.
Inside, you're saying inside the square?
I'm saying inside the square,
Yeah.
and let him be the receive player. He doesn't need to be the absolute clearance and contest player. You can have that nice mix. Marshall's that, Ross is that, Steele is that. But I don't know what you guys think, but you're looking at that St Kilda midfield mix. There's no real polish and real damaging, impactful player with ball in hand. And and like Kingy's been saying, I think this is the potential move that Ross could make
Gerard,
potentially this week and
And
beyond.
Hoyne, who would you rather in ruck? You got your pick right now. Would you rather Rowan Marshall or Tim English?
No, give me Marshall.
Really?
Anybody who saw Tim English last week would be recency
that
bias.
recency bias, I understand, but he is the All-Australian ruckman.
But Marshall's getting so many clearances himself. I think he's been fantastic so far this season.
Yeah.
My question to you is Jack Sinclair's lack of form impacting on that clearance? on that ball movement.
It might be, and clearly he's had a bit of an impacted, pre-season, which can, obviously have some significant impact on your overall performance. So he's, we had him as one of the best players in the competition last year. He's nowhere near at that level at the moment for obvious reasons. But I think, you do have a weapon here in terms of what you're doing at the absolute stoppage. Try and maximise it, and try and look at actually.
Last week,
that.
Kane, Rowan Marshall was up against Kieran Briggs, who was the 7th highest rated player in the game, I think, up until that point.
And destroyed him.
And totally destroyed him, although Briggsy, to his credit, he fought back and got 5 hit-outs to advantage in the last quarter, which helped.
Yeah, and this text has just come through from 828 about getting Owens into the midfield as well. Absolutely all for it. Not as a ruckman, but getting him in as a centre bounce player as well. Has potential.
So this game, I know you haven't even, and you've got a lot of things to address. We haven't addressed the Bulldogs yet with you, Hoyne. You might be sick of doing it because it's probably the similar pattern that has emerged, that they just can't defend. And whilst it's all been about selection and interesting selection calls that he's made, I think the real problem is their inability to defend and halt momentum. So it's a fascinating game. If the Saints aren't doing that much damage from stoppage, and the Bulldogs, without Libba, of course, this week, but they've still got a pretty good midfield, who would you favour this week? And, of course, the Saints may be missing Max King, of course.
I think Ross said King's out, didn't he?
Yeah, I think someone just said it on the text machine that he's
He's out, is he?
potentially out this week, which is going to be a huge loss.
Not on last week's form.
I think the Dogs. I think their performance against Essendon really surprised me. I mean, I mentioned them last week that they were actually going okay, I thought. So I think that actually surprised me. And they can always, not that there's any numbers behind this, Kane, but the emotional response. I reckon I'm a believer in that the emotional response that you can get up after, copping some criticism in the media. So, but it just comes, just down to that trust element. I think with the Dogs as well, that sort of it's hard to to have any sort of certainty in terms of what they're going to dish up.
Bailey Dale get picked this week, do you think, Kane?
100%. 100% he will get picked. And Caleb Daniel will get picked
Caleb
as well.
Daniels?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have Lockie Bramble or you're going to have Caleb Daniel. You're going to have Baker or Bailey Dale. Like, goodness sake. Ridiculous. The Twitter poll.
I like Baker, except his kicking just lets him down so often.
How can you kick it out on the full into row 10 of the stand? Like, he can't miss by 20 metres. There'd be some players that wouldn't kick it out on the full 3 times in their whole career, and he kicked it 3 times out on the full in one game. I couldn't believe that. Right, there's a Twitter poll up. I've got who would you rather, Tim English or Rowan Marshall? And overwhelmingly, at the moment, early days, just 150 votes, 73% of the punters would rather Rowan Marshall. You can check that out on our socials. What about the Bombers, quickly?
Yeah, so I just wanted to give Essendon a little bit of love. We're not going to talk about them defensively for a long time until we actually see. That's a bit of a boring topic. But I just want to give their midfield a bit of love. So the complete opposite to what St Kilda are doing from a midfield perspective, their ability to be able to convert clearances and then be able to convert them into effective clearances is the third best in the competition. So Zach Merritt has had 26 clearances this year. 10 of them have gone on the scoreboard, which is a ridiculous return. Sam Durham's only had 14 clearances, but 13 of them have been effective, which means that 13 of his 14 haven't gone back to the opposition. They haven't been dirty sort of clearances, which might sort of surprise people, just given his sort of real competitiveness and his pressure. That he's probably not recognised for his absolute sort of cleanliness, if you like. But one player I just want to put on the agenda is Darcy Parish. And again, I know he's had a disappointing pre-season, or sort of a shortened pre-season. But the form that he's
awful,
in
I
can't believe what's happened to him.
No, either can I. And you watch him,
shocked.
He is plodding around a football oval. He just has lost all spark and all zip and all damage with the ball. He's had 5 entries for the year. He's had 5 inside 50s for the year. He kicked 3 goals only last year. He's kicked 1 point for the year. He's not kicking the ball anymore. I think he's had 13 kicks for the year. He's only played 3 games, but I think he's had 13 kicks for the year or something. Certainly under 20 kicks for the year. It's remarkable, the drop-off in form from him. I can't believe it.
So we've got him on our rating system as the second worst player in the competition.
Yeah, doesn't surprise me.
At the moment. 3 years ago, 2021, he was the 14th best player in the competition. So it's just...
I've told you that, Hoyne. Whenever you say that, you say second worst, you've got to tell us who the worst is.
I think it's his teammate, actually, Jai Menzies, at the moment. But yeah, I just find that really surprising in terms of just what's actually happened. And it's not through a lack of midfield minutes. He's still playing 80 to 90% of his game time as a midfielder.
Question off the text relating to Essendon and Xavier Dersmont. Was it his best rated game ever on the weekend?
No, it wasn't his best rated game, but his 3-week patch at the moment has actually been really impressive. For the role that he's playing. So he's he's actually back to some form that he showed probably 4 or 5 years ago.
How's his brother Zane going?
I feel for Zane playing in a really challenging role at the moment in that team. So really hard position for him to play at the moment.
Yeah, he'll be fine. But as you said, it's an impossible task for him in his first year to be playing in that role.